Hey there, it's Christian from 7 Gaming Network, and I'm here with another Star Wars Destiny Tactica about this fella, Jabba the Hutt, the Great and Mighty, as he's titled in his card. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to talk through the card and the aspects of it, and then I'll talk a little bit about how we can use him. We'll talk about what decks he can go in, and also how to play against Jabba, which you more than likely will end up doing so at some point. So, first of all, one of the reasons I love Star Wars Destiny is how well they've implemented mechanics and theme together. And I think there are probably few better examples of using the theme of a character like Jabba the Hutt and how he plays out in the game. So, Jabba the Hutt in Star Wars Destiny, he's a control, he's a support character. He's your classic enabler type character. So he makes everyone else that he's with better. And he also brings definite threats to the table, but they are of a more subtle variety than dealing out ranged or melee damage. And we'll talk about those as we talk about his die faces. So let's start out with these two focus sides. Now, straight away, that's really strong. So we can see that we're going to be able to use him to turn other dice to whatever facing we want. So really we get the sense of Jabba already being able to manipulate and control the people that he's working with and get the best out of them, which seems to be very appropriate for a character like Jabba the Hutt. Now these two focus results, remember, yes, you can be using them on your other characters and trying to improve their results, but also if you've got a 2-die version of Jabba, you can be using it on himself. Now, the reason you might want to do that is that he also has another 2 very strong sides that you can use the 1 die to focus the other one onto. Now those 2 are, firstly, a 2 disrupt side. So that's get rid of 2 of your opponent's resources when you resolve that die. So that in itself is really strong. I mean, that's what you get per round. So to be able to get rid of 2 of those resources, if you get to get that off before your opponent uses them, is very, very strong. It's also threat. You have a 2 disrupt side on the table, and you can just leave that there, and it will stop your opponent from wanting to resolve their resource sides. If you've played a game of Destiny yet, you may well have come across that whole, oh, they've got that disrupt on the table, I don't really want to resolve my resource die because it's just going to go. And that again is the threat element that I think is really, really important in games like this, because they provide you with the board control. You're making your opponent's options become much smaller, much less varied, and that's always a really strong thing. And again, I'll keep coming back to it, it's very Jabba. Now, I think other cards and how you might use that ability or maximise it, you've got cards like My Kind of Scum, again great theme, really comes together, and that's a card that means that when you disrupt someone, you tap that card, it's a support card before you do a disrupt resolution, and you'll get as many resources as you just disrupted. So it can be a way of ramping up the amount of resources that this deck has. Now, in my playtesting, and I think generally in the feeling across forums, you'll tend to find that this is a strategy at the moment, a denial strategy as we would generally call it in these kind of games. It isn't quite there yet, it's not quite strong enough, it perhaps doesn't have quite enough good cards in the card pool, maybe there needs to be another denial character. But one of the inherent problems of a denial type deck is that once you have denied those resources, any other denial that you have, any other resource disrupt that you have is useless because they haven't got any resources to disrupt. So it's a little trickier, I think, to manage a really good disrupt deck. And I'm sure some of these will become stronger as time goes by and we get more cards. But right now, as of the Awakenings initial set being released, I don't think that's necessarily the strongest strategy to go into the game with for how you're going to use Jabba, although that 2 disrupt side is always going to be a useful threat to have on the table. Now the other side of the denial type game that Jabba brings is the 2 discard. Now that result on a die is really strong. bear in mind we can have a two dice version of Jabba, the elite version, and if we could be rolling 4 discard in a turn, that's really scary, especially if it's early on, because discard in this game is enormous. Many times there's really 2 ways that cards are used in Destiny. If you're a control player, you want the options. You want to have those control cards in hand, those dice manipulation cards, to be able to neuter your opponent's damage and to maintain control of the board as much as you can. You can say, yes, you can do that damage to me, or no, here's a card that says you can't. So that's what the control deck wants to do against you. And if you discard 2, 3, 4 of their cards, you're limiting their options. Really powerful. And against an aggro deck, which is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, of course, to a control deck, well, they generally want to use their cards to be able to maybe play 1 upgrade in a turn, because they're probably not going to run lots of resources, those decks. They might play their 1 upgrade a turn, and then they're going to rely upon their 4 cards left in hand to be discarding, to be steadily improving their dice on the table, re-rolling the ones that they need, keeping the results that they like, until they maximise the amount of damage that they try and do to you in those early rounds. Well, if you're discarding 4 of their cards, they're kind of reliant upon those initial rolls that they make with the characters when they first activate them. So again, really, really strong to be able to do that to them. So, and of course, it also plays into the fact that one of the ways in which you win in Destiny is by milling your opponent and getting rid of all their cards. So when we take into account how useful discard is, that's not to be underestimated. And that, along with focus, is really why you end up running Jabba. Now, he also has 1 resource side, and that's fine. Quite a few of the decks that we find Jabba in and tend to like having some resources to play with. They like to play the odd expensive dice onto the table with cards like Crime Lord, which we'll talk a little more about later. Now, after those die sides, which are strong, I mean, we're happy with all of those. We also, of course, have his ability. Excuse me while I take a mouthful of drink. This ability, if we weren't happy with those dice sides, which we really should be for the points, and we'll talk about those, this ability is really, again, super strong. We can use it to reroll any yellow die. Now, because of the timing structure in Destiny, you can use that even to reroll Jabba's own dice. So if you tap him, you activate him, and you roll your 2 dice, and you roll a blank, you get a free reroll to reroll that blank. If you know you really need to get some discard off to mill him down, and it's the last turn of the game and there's that real pressure there, and you roll 1 discard and you need that other discard result, hey, you can roll and use his ability to re-roll 1 of those dice that doesn't hit the discard. There's so many ways in which you can use it. You need to force through some damage with maybe Django, who you've paired him with. You'll be able to do that. Yellow die, loads of upgrades. Those are very good upgrades that we want to re-roll, and this is where Jabba's ability becomes very, very strong. And again, it's very, very fitting. Jabba is a character who gets things done. Yeah, he makes it happen. So again, it's great theme. I love how they've implemented it, and this ability is a really good example of how Jabba enables the other characters or himself to get the job done. So let's talk about these points then. Now, 11 points for the 1 diversion. Now, that 1 diversion, and I realise I'm saying diversion, but hey, that 1 diversion is a very, very solid choice. Not only because it's a really good dice, but also because we're bringing that ability to the table. And so for only 11 points, it's very strong to have that around, because that's giving us a lot of other points to play around with, and we've got lots and lots of varied options that we can then pair with Jabba if we take his 1 die version. Now, if we go with the 2 dice version, that's only 14 points. To get an extra die of that quality for only an extra 3 points, brilliant. Especially as now what's become available is the 4 discard play. and of course we've got other ways of focusing. We've got extra focus on the board that we can get with at least one of those 2 discards to go off. Now, all things told, 14 also allows us to have lots of really strong options to pair him with. So let's have a little look at some of these options that we can have in terms of putting decks together, now that we've talked about his points. So for the 2 dice version, which I think is probably generally the stronger use of him, for only 3 points to get an extra dice of that extra die of that quality is really great. So an easy one to get hold of generally would be Django, and that makes a really nice pairing. Django wants to play quite quickly, and Jabba with the focus eyes can be a bit slower. So what Django does is he helps to offset the fact that using focus can be extra actions and can be a little bit slower, because of course Django's got that ability of being able to activate in response to another character activating. And also, if you're running the 2 character version, Django being able to be that little bit quicker helps you then to push towards getting your dice sorted, maximising your dice, focus coming in. You don't need to try and do costly re-rolls that take 2 or 3 goes to get the result you want. You just focus it and get it done with Jabba. Resolve your damage, claim, and you've got control. So that works really quite nicely as a pairing, and you can get some pretty quick kills with that pairing. And also, of course, a deck with Jabba in can also generate resources often quite well, and that means you get those upgrades on Django nice and quickly. Now, with the 14 points, we can also have a 2-die version of Dooku. And I think this is a really strong pairing. Jabba Dooku is hard work to play against. Dooku also brings another 2 face discard side. It costs 1 resource, but again, a deck with Jabba in can generally bring the resources, so we don't mind that so much. And being able to have 4 character dice with a grand total of 8 discard results on there is absolutely not to be underestimated, and it can completely neuter an aggro deck's ability to maximise their damage, or completely neuter a control deck's ability to control what's going on. So that amount of discard is not to be sniffed at. When you also bring into account the fact that Dooku's bringing blue control elements to the deck, going with Jabba Dooku is a great pairing. And especially you can play things like Thermal Detonator with Jabba, which is again even more discard, and it can become very, very scary. Bear in mind your discard results, they're similar to the Disrupt in the fact that once they haven't got any cards to discard, it becomes slightly less powerful, but I don't think that detracts from the massive impact that it is getting rid of cards early in a turn from an opponent's hand. So Jabba Dooku is very strong, and then I would also say Jabba Vader, we've seen that quite a few times. I'm not sure in playing that it's been quite as strong as Jabba Dooku. I think Jabba Dooku is probably a bit more difficult to play, as most control-y type decks are. Jabba Vader is a little more simple because you've got a beat stick in Vader, it's the 1-die version, but hey, he's got a 3 melee side. And Jabba's again going to help him to get the job done. He's going to have those focus coming out. Also, of course, Vader's got the inherent discard when you activate him as part of his ability, which is very strong, and so it's really not difficult with a 2-die Jabba and Vader to be regularly discarding 3 cards of theirs every turn, and 3 cards discarded a turn is really limiting your opponent's options. So those are all good combinations that you can use. Single die versions, there's so many ones that you could do with him. You could bring in characters like Balatik and maybe a Stormtrooper and go heavy with range damage. You can go really control-y with 2 Night Sisters. That's a deck that I'm working on at the moment because the Night Sisters, they also have discard sides on. It's only a 1. And disrupt sides, so they're kind of like mini Jabbas in that respect. but instead of focus they've got damage, so they can bring the damage, and if you can get upgrades on them, but it's a super control-y list to do that. Have a look out for that. I'll post up a list and a video for that one soon. So there are many options with the one die version of Jabba. So the one thing I haven't talked about, of course, is Crime Lord, which is a great card to go with Jabba, and it's expensive to get in. You're looking at 4 resources just to play the die out, but it's a really strong die. It's got lots of great sides on it, and the ability, of course, is another way of winning the game. It's hard to get 5 resources together to be able to play out that special, that ability. But with the focus that Jabba's got, you can focus that Crime Lord die to that side if you can get the resources available. But I think Crime Lord's a really strong card to play with Jabba, because it's going back to that threat principle again. You only need to get to 3 resources with Jabba and Crime Lord for your opponent start thinking, oh crikey, I really don't want Crime Lord to go off. And they start diverting resources to disrupting you or preventing you getting to that 5 resource point, or they start rushing, and it might not be your plan at all, but the fact that you've got it there is that inherent threat that makes your opponent play differently, and again, that's always very strong. So in summary, Jabba is he is the puppet master that we've seen so far in this game. We don't have Palpatine yet. Very much looking forward to seeing him in the game. But what we see with Jabba is this classic crime gang lord who is pulling the strings, he's brokering the deals, he's getting the black market resources into the field of battle, and he's equipping the characters, and he's making them, he's really getting the best out of his minions or his bounty hunters or whoever's working alongside him. He's a great card, he's a great character, and I really think he's one of the best in the game currently. So go get hold of him, go start building decks with him. Yes, he's a legendary, so he's a little more expensive to get hold of, or a little more difficult to get hold of, but I highly recommend playing with him. He's very strong, and hey, the one die version gives you lots and lots of options, so don't feel you have to go and get the elite, but it's great if you do. Go and enjoy building decks with Jabba, and feel free to get in touch with me. You can get into the Discord channel, the Knights of Ren Discord channel, which is where much of the Star Wars Destiny stuff tends to kick off from and build from. And you can contact me through there. My online handle is Peace Lord. So feel free to get in touch, send me messages. If there's anything I've missed out about Jabba that you think people should know about, put it in the comments section. What I would love for people to use these videos for is, maybe they're fairly new to the game, they're coming and reading the Tactica, and if there's anything I miss, if they can then read it in the comments that you guys are putting on the bottom, that's brilliant, that's exactly what we want. So anyway, go build decks with Jabba in and enjoy being a crime lord.